All right, here we go. Episode 3, Helicopter and Snowplow Parenting When Good Intentions Go Awry.
Dun dun dun.
This is going to be a good one. Welcome and thank you for stopping by. If this is your first time, I'm Alyssa. And we're your hosts of the Vows, Vibes, and Virtues podcast. All right, babe, kick us off.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about today. Let's discuss these different types of parenting and give our listeners some positive and helpful suggestions that will benefit their children more than these two styles. We're going to explore what these styles entail, their potential impacts on children, and the most important, how a Christian worldview can inform and guide our parenting decisions in light of these trends.
This is going to be good. So I have to tell you, before we started studying for this episode, I had no idea what snowplow parenting was.
I'd never heard of it either.
I actually have to give a shout out to my boss because he's the one who brought it up and he's like, that would be a great topic. And I said, I will look into that. So here we are.
And then I did all the research. Just joking.
All right. So I think we should start with defining what the two terms mean for not just us to dive deeper, but for our listeners to understand the difference between the two.
Yeah. All right. Let's start with helicopter parenting. This person hovers over their child, constantly involved in every aspect of their life, often out of a desire to protect and ensure success, versus a snowplow parent plows obstacles out of their child's way, removing challenges and discomfort to create an easy path.
So hovering, removing those obstacles versus somebody literally removing so that their child doesn't really know what any type of difficulty is.
Yeah, basically, one parent takes the obstacles out of the way, and the other one forces their way into those obstacles and
Interesting.
does them for the child.
Interesting.
So let's take a little deeper dive into helicopter parenting first. Some of these characteristics and examples: excessive involvement in homework, social life, extracurricular activities, making decisions for the child instead of with the child, constant communication with teachers, coaches, other adults to advocate for the child, and a fear of failure or discomfort for the child.
This one's actually resonating with me.
Yeah. Well, some of the negative aspects that can come out in the child can be a lack of independence and problem-solving skills, reduced resilience and coping mechanisms when facing adversity, anxiety and perfectionism, difficulty with decision-making.
So I think of this, what is the generation underneath us? It's Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
Gen Z totally comes to mind on this whole helicopter. They don't think that they really know how to do anything for themselves.
You mean their parents were helicopter parents?
Yes, I'm sorry. They're Gen Z's parents, 100%, I feel like, in today's society, helicopter parents. Where Gen Z's, they don't do much of anything for themselves. They're very much baby. Meals are being cooked. Laundry is still being done. I mean, I don't even think they're in a rush to get their driver's license nowadays. And that's just mind-blowing to me because I couldn't wait to get my license.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. I don't think it's specific to one generation. I do think it's more prevalent today. I think that our generation, our parents were maybe a little bit harder on us and we were really independent, and they were kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum as far as involvement.
Right.
So as an overcorrection, our generation and the one before us tended to be more involved with their child's life, and to the extreme of hovering over that child, making sure that they don't get hurt or that they get on a specific team, or that
There's no sense of independence happening for these kids. Interesting.
Yeah, so let's dive into snowplow parenting now.
Okay.
Some characteristics and examples of snowplow parenting are intervening to prevent any struggle, disappointment, or negative consequences, calling schools to change grades, demanding special treatment, removing chores or responsibilities so the child has an easier life, paying for things or fixing problems that the child should be responsible for. Some negative impacts on the child can be entitlement, lack of appreciation, poor impulse control and delayed gratification, inability to cope with failure or setbacks, lack of accountability.
You think of, okay, so removing all of those obstacles. I think of mommy and daddy just kind of coming in to save the day. And 100% I could see a child being becoming very privileged and entitled.
Yeah, for me, this one really reminds me of the typical Hollywood stereotype of
Yes.
the rich kid and the
Yes.
parents buying their way.
Into college or
Yeah,
changing the grades.
getting them out of trouble at school, and their child becomes a sociopath.
100%. Oh,
I'm
that's
not saying everybody's kid that they've had this style is a sociopath, but it seems to me the difference, you've got helicopter children
right.
that are, for a lack of a better term, lazy or incompetent adults, can't work independently.
They do anything for themselves.
You've got snowplow children who have had everything done
Handed
for them,
to everything handed,
so they
yeah.
expect everything to continue to be handed to them and never have to face any consequences.
Both of these seem very problematic for the long term and into adulthood. I mean, could you imagine if you're so used to the helicopter parent doing and controlling everything for you, then how could you imagine going into the real world, like getting a job, doing just the day-to-day adult things? Like,
I imagine it's got to be pretty scary. If you've never had to make any decisions for yourself and then all of a sudden you're 18,
that's
19,
terrifying.
and you have to make every decision: where you're going to live, what are you going to eat, what are you going to do with the rest of your life. Mom and dad made all these decisions for me before.
So instead of mom and dad raising the child into that independence, okay, this is how you do your laundry, this is how you cook your meals, encouraging to get out of the house, encouraging to be independent from them and have their own, essentially like their own life as a child should. I mean, of course, mom and dad should be aware and shelter up to a certain age, but even so, like our twins are 5 years old and we are now establishing that independence. Like they're old enough to brush their teeth, they're old enough to help with laundry. It's important to establish independence at a very young age.
And it's important for children to learn what failure is.
Absolutely.
If you experience failure for the first time as an adult, how are you going to cope with that? How are you going to continue going to work when you fail to do something or fail to do something in your family? What are you going to do? If you never learned how to overcome an obstacle before, in both of these scenarios, parents take the obstacles or mitigate them. How are you supposed to know what to properly do in those scenarios if you've never had to experience them?
Well, I imagine that would be really traumatic and possibly leading into mental health issues. Like,
Yeah,
that's scary to think about.
all kinds of different things. So let's talk about some positive things that parents can do from Christian perspective, as that's our perspective.
Yes. Well, and let's be clear. We want the listeners to understand we by no means think that we are perfect parents, and I never, ever want to come across that way. No, we are not. I think it's important for you and I to have these conversations and see every aspect, see different views from different parenting techniques to it's important that we hear it all so that we can understand how best are we going to choose to raise our children.
And although some of these things that we're going to talk about are from a Christian perspective, a lot of them can be applied to anybody.
Absolutely.
Sure, the first half of these ones are probably going to be more geared to our Christian people, our Christian family out there. But some of these other ones you're going to find that they can apply in any scenario to anybody that's out there listening to us. So let's kick it off.
Okay.
We're going to start with some Christian principles here for parenting. Number one, prayer.
Absolutely.
Praying for your child, praying for wisdom, praying for guidance, knowledge. Every day, you and I, we try and pray every day. Sometimes we fail to do that, but that is a part of being human.
Yep.
But also getting your child involved and starting that communication.
It's so sweet to see. I mean, even at this young age and developing that relationship with God and then as a unit.
Well, and that leads into the second point of discipleship.
Yeah.
As parents, our primary goal is to raise children who love and follow Christ and have their own personal relationship with God. And then the third part of that would be trusting in God's plan, releasing our need for control and trusting God's perfect plan for our child's lives.
That is so hard. Okay, so when we were actually brainstorming on this one, trusting in God's plan, I immediately had a flashback. Do you remember it was Mother's Day service, and our pastor was going on about how beautiful and wonderful it is for us mamas to raise these children, but to understand and see the bigger picture that we might be their guardians, their parents, but at the end of the day, they are not ours. They are God's. And we as disciples of Christ, learning how to raise God's children. It's a huge undertaking, and it's very scary to think about.
For sure. And I can see how that would come across as scary for other people out there that are listening in that may not be Christians as well.
What do you mean they're
What
not
do
your
you mean they're
kids?
not their kids. Obviously, we take care of them.
We do take care of them.
We're not forcing them into anything. But it is important that in all aspects, we are all God's children in a sense. So we're raising children that are also his. So it's just that, like we talked about last time, with where God is in the relationship. He's first, then you,
Yep.
then the kids.
And then everybody else underneath.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same with them. God should come first.
Yeah.
And then us.
Yeah.
At this point in time, until they get to be adults and get married.
Yeah.
It's important for us to be examples to our children, to model the life of Christ in
Yeah.
their own lives so they know what it looks like and how to do it for themselves.
Absolutely. Let's talk about, so both parenting styles are removing those roadblocks, removing those difficulties in life, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about allowing age-appropriate risk and failures in children.
Right.
Within safe boundaries, all children will try, fail, and learn. That's how it should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Children need to learn how to fail within reason.
Within
obviously.
reason.
They need to know what it is to lose a game,
Yep.
to get a bad grade on a paper, to fall off their bike, take the training wheels off.
All of those are huge milestones, huge learning lessons that shape you into who you're going to become and how you, okay, well, I didn't do the best on this exam or this test or this quiz. Okay, what do I need to do better? How do I get that A that I want? Do I put in more studying time?
Right.
Like, it'll teach a child to work harder, not and then take these lessons and apply them into adulthood once we get out into the real world.
And it also opens up the door for them to learn what consequences are.
Absolutely.
Even when they break our rules, they're going to need to face consequences.
Yep.
Because when they're no longer under our roof, there will be consequences for their actions. And we won't be there to bail them out necessarily. So it's important as young children to set boundaries for them and to give them responsibilities. And when they don't succeed, we have discussions with them. We show them what the consequences are, and we show what they can do to do it right the next time.
Mom and dad will only be here for so long. And of course, we're going to be there. We're going to help them up, put a Band-Aid, wipe the tears away. But you've got to have that independence. You have to be able to figure things out. Mom and dad will be here for right now to help you, but one day we won't be. So you have to be able to navigate all of those situations, the good, bad, and ugly.
And another point to failure is to learn that there is forgiveness, especially when it comes to God. He is all forgiving when you ask for his forgiveness. And with us too, I mean, when they break our rules, if we're modeling Christ, we need to be allowing for that forgiveness as well. That doesn't mean we have to forget. That doesn't mean they don't face the consequences, but they do learn what forgiveness is.
Right. I agree. Okay, so now let's talk about equipping for spiritual battles. I'm going to let you take this one. I know.
Teaching them to put on the armor of God rather than shielding them away from every spiritual. As children, they will still be exposed to spiritual battles. It starts at a very early age with sexual images and material, drugs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're going to be exposed to all of this. Yeah, I think at a younger age than maybe you and I were exposed to these things. I mean, but I mean, I think they have more access now. I mean, you think about it.
I had dial-up when I was.
Yeah, it's even.
I did
it's
not
crazy.
have all of the power of the internet in the palm of my hand.
This is so scary. That
We
is
had Palm Pilots.
that is definitely scary to think
I hope
about.
somebody knows what a Palm Pilot is. But they're also going to have to learn how to have that one-on-one relationship with God, as that is their greatest defense. That is their greatest protection. And they'll have opportunities to share what they know with others.
Yeah.
At an early age, they will get to experience different lifestyles, and we want them to have a firm grasp in what they believe.
Yep. Also, too, I think open communication is huge. We definitely want to create that safe space for them to share their struggles, and it allows us to give them the guidance that they need as their parents. But none of that can happen if we're removing all of those obstacles from underneath them.
If we're doing everything for them, what's there to communicate about?
Nothing.
Right. That is also a key element that a lot of parents miss, is that open communication. When a child comes to you and tells you something that they did, they respond, as we all do. We have human emotions, obviously.
Right.
We're going to react. But they respond and they get mad, they yell, you get grounded, you get punished. And depending on the scenario, that may be appropriate. But they need to know that they can come and tell mom and daddy.
Anything. That door's
Doesn't
got to
matter
be
what it
open.
is.
Yeah.
And that they can trust in us that we will guide them
To the best of our ability.
to the best of our abilities
Yeah.
to make the right choice. And sometimes that will be facing consequences.
It is scary, but I think if we raise our kids up, and even starting at a young age, and I don't remember if I read this or I heard it or whatnot regarding communication, but even a child at the twins, again, we use our children because they're 5, but even having conversations with them, bringing yourself down to their eye level.
Yeah.
And when we have situations where we're upset with them or angry with them, instead of doing the typical thing that I am learning to not do and immediately yell and fly off the handle, take a deep breath. Let's come eye level to them. Let's talk about why what you did is wrong and how to avoid it from happening again. I think if we start that open communication at a young age, we
And break it down to their
absolutely break it down to their level, establish that trust. Okay, now mom and or dad are not just going to freak out at me, but I know I can now trust them to come and they're going to listen to me. We're going to have that heart to heart. They're going to listen with open eyes and ears and not be scared to approach us, because if we build that foundation now while they're young, as they get older and the really scary things happen, or the really, I don't know if I want to come to mom and dad, I don't know if I can trust them, how are they going to react? We don't have to worry about that because we've built that communication, we've built that safe place for them, and ultimately that's what we want as parents. We want our kids to come to us.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that with both of these styles, parents come out of a place of love. I don't think in any scenario, in either of these two scenarios, the parents are coming out of malice or ill intent towards their children.
I think it's good intentions, but not truly understanding the consequences.
The effects.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We want to set our children up for success. And with these two styles of parenting, you're setting your child up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that you're trying maybe to avoid some trauma that you went through as a child, so you're trying to remove some of those roadblocks or circumvent those roadblocks because you went through them as a child. You want your child to avoid that, because we do want the best for our children.
And to an extent, I think you can do that, but you can't completely do that.
And I'm not saying don't advocate for your child.
Right.
Obviously, parents should be the strongest advocate for their children.
Yes.
However, we shouldn't be calling their teacher to get their grades changed because they failed a math test. If they failed a math test, it's because they didn't study for it.
They waited until the last minute, and there are consequences for not holding up your end of the bargain.
Or they're having trouble with the class and they need to get a tutor or take a special class or something along those lines. But it's not calling Miss Mary and being like, hey, you need to change my son's grade from a D to an A. It's you call Miss Mary and be like, hey,
What happened? What do we need to do?
Wade
Yeah.
failed his test, and I just want to know what's going on. Can we have a discussion sometime? Can we talk about his participation in class, if he's passing his homework, all of these things, getting involved with what's actually happening in the classroom. Is there any extra homework that he needs to do? Is there a tutor that he can see? Is there a special class he needs to be in? Get the teacher's perspective.
Absolutely.
They spend so much time with your child while they're there. Although I'm not a teacher, I feel like if I were to get that phone call, I would overwhelmingly want the second phone call of the teacher, the parent wanting to be involved.
Yes.
In the child.
This is a
What
group.
can I do? Where can I go? What can I do to help my son succeed in this class?
Agreed. That was a shout out to Miss Mary. We love you.
Honestly, it was just a name that popped up in my head, but that's true.
Miss Mary was their first teacher, so, and I know she watches.
I doubt Wade's going to fail math. He is very sharp.
Not the point.
Just an example.
Okay, so I think we should do a little bit of self-reflection now that we've talked about both of these parenting styles. So, as we've discussed, do you think you've recognized any of these tendencies in our own parenting style? We've got to be brutally honest here.
I think so. I mean, one, our kids haven't started school yet.
I know, but it's not just school. I think it's just parenting
in general.
in general. I think I've been guilty of some of that.
It's hard when they're so young, between the ages of 0 to 4. I'd say.
Right.
They're just learning to be humans.
True.
They need somebody to show them how to do things. So we tend to do them, but we've also allowed them to be independent. I mean,
100% working on that.
we tell them to get their step stool and wash their hands and help with dishes and, take showers by themselves now. I mean,
Right. Brush their own teeth.
brush their own teeth.
But I think I've been slightly guilty of over coddling at some points. And I'm realizing that, okay, yep, they're still smaller, still are babies, yes, but.
Not me. I just let them go play until I hear screaming, and then I yell from the other room, "What's going on over there?"
But I need to work on not so much coddling. And I think I am. I'm more getting better.
It's harder for moms than it is.
Yeah, for sure.
Not saying all dads are that way. I don't mean to generalize completely, but I think it is something that more women struggle with, being overly involved.
Yeah, being that mama bear. Yeah, for sure. So how do you think that we could adjust our approach to better align with God's will for Wade and Lana's growth?
Good question. I don't know that I know the answer to that question just yet. I feel like we've come a long way. I think getting them more involved with having their own personal relationship. I think when they get into school, making sure that they're staying on top of their homework, but allowing them to be independent. I think we're about to make this huge change in our lives, in all 4 of our lives, both kids and yours and mine.
Yeah.
When they start school, and things are going to be a lot different.
Yeah, I agree. Is there maybe one small step you think that we could take this week to foster more independence or resilience in Wade and Lana?
I guess we can let them make dinner.
Too much independence, babe.
I know, I keep telling them, hey, what are you making for dinner? I can't make dinner, I'm fine.
No, but seriously, what's one thing that we could work on this week to foster more independence? So actually, this is actually perfect timing. So we start VBS this week, okay? And the twins have to get to bed on time. This is going to be a good trial run, before school, because they have to get up on time to be ready. We know our kids, especially Wade, is not a morning person, and I'm going to rely on him. I'm going to need him to get his butt in gear, get in the bathroom, wash your face, brush your teeth. You got to do it, buddy.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good trial run this week. I'm excited.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good. We definitely need to get the kids on a schedule.
Yes.
We have been very lax in that.
They kind of do their own thing, go to bed when they want, and it's not really good.
Air dirty laundry on the internet.
I mean, we're going to be honest with our listeners, but we've been very lax with them on that, and they're in for a rude awakening because school is about to start, and we've got to get them on a schedule.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that is something we can start this week, is getting them into a regular routine with going to bed and getting up and making that their response. So
yeah.
And maybe we have to come up with some consequences.
Yeah.
If we don't do that.
I agree. It is scary. All right. Well, I think that wraps up today's episode. Did you have anything you wanted to add before I close this out?
As we're wrapping up, parenting is really hard, and we're all learning. Remember, God's grace is sufficient. Lean on Him. Pray every day. I pray that all of you people out there have your own relationship with Christ, and that you lean on Him and your community around you to help grow your children.
Yeah, because it takes a community. It's not just you and I.
And even when your children are grown, you still never stop being a parent. So
100%.
There's always going to be times, even with adult children, that they're going to need your advice. And you're going to be able to give that advice to them during those times. And it should reflect a helpful yet independent response.
Yeah.
Right? They should be able to hear your advice without you telling them, this is what you should do. You should give it in a manner of, here's what I would do, or these are the things you could do.
Yeah.
If you do it like this, this may happen. You could still lay out those consequences, but have that adult conversation with them.
Yeah.
Don't try and say, well, I would never do that. Or, well, if you do that, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be messed up. It's the attitude that you come with it.
Yeah.
Because now, although they are your children still.
You still have to guide them.
Yeah. You still have to guide them. However, they're adults now. So they're closer to peers than they are children.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you show them a level of respect.
Yep.
That they are adults, independent people, capable of making their own decisions.
give them the tools that you know will help them, but
Right.
ultimately you can't make decisions for them. And
Right.
yeah,
And hopefully that's something that you've taught them their entire lives and you have that skill mastered
Yeah.
now as they're adults. But if you haven't, there's no time like today to learn a new skill.
absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today on the Vows, Vibes, and Virtues podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and that it's been an encouragement and a challenge. Join us next time for our next episode about finances in marriage. That one's going to be a good one. If you at all enjoyed today's episode, please give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and feel free to leave us a comment down below if you guys have any episode suggestions or any prayer requests. Again, you guys can always reach us on our personal email, link down in the show notes. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.